Hello and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, your host, Freddie Hall. Hope you're doing all okay out there. Johnny, welcome, and welcome Andrew for the first time on the Tuesday show this season. You'll be catching Andrew on a lot of our other shows that we are doing throughout the season, so a lot of exciting content to come from the Franchise Tag Podcast. More preseason games have occurred this weekend, just gone. I know some of them were sort of coinciding with some of the football games, so maybe you watched the regular as the Premiership started as well this weekend, and you caught the NFL as well. Sport is back. The world feels better because all the sport is coming back. We had the Euros, we had the Olympics, and now we've got our three, I suppose, two loves, which is football and American football. Maybe not in that order necessarily, but right. To begin with tonight, we're going to talk about the quarterback situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, I'm probably going to have a lot to say about this, but obviously I'm going to hear debates and chat from these two guys here. So we did see Russell Wilson play for the first time for the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Buffalo Bills in their preseason game, of which the Steelers lost 9-3, which obviously was an incredibly exciting game for all viewers involved with that game. A lot of things going on, clearly not, as you can hear the sarcasm in my voice. And then we also saw Justin Fields as well. Wilson for the game was 8 for 10, 47 yards, and Fields for the game was 11 for 17, 92 yards. Two quarterbacks, which, I mean, a 12-year career for Russell Wilson, Andrew, and only a 3-year career for Justin Fields so far, to Russell Wilson being formerly of the Seattle Seahawks, drafted by them, then to the Denver Broncos in that blockbuster trade a few years ago, onto the Pittsburgh Steelers on a year contract. Fields being drafted by the Chicago Bears, and then it not really panning out there, him moving to the Steelers as well on a 1-year deal. Now we've seen both quarterbacks play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, no matter how dog-awful the game was. I mean, how do you feel the Steelers fans are feeling after a showing of both of these quarterbacks?
I mean, you've got to be worried, Fred, because for me, what I've been seeing from it is an issue that I've seen every single year, and for some reason, you just can't get it right. And it's O-line issues again, right? That seems to be the problem. You've got Russell Wilson kind of not being able to complete any first downs. He was out there for 8 series, only completed 1 first down, only got over the halfway line once, got sacked 3 times, keeping hold of the ball too long. And then you've got Justin Fields, obviously struggling to, not just this one, but the game previously, struggling to get the connection with the center and having the fumbles. And it just looks like these guys just haven't really got any time in the pocket or to do anything. And that stems from this O-line, which we've had extensive conversations about. They just can't get it right, can they, mate? And if that's the case, I know which quarterback I'd lean on if you're having O-line issues. So I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later.
Johnny, obviously over the summer when they brought Russell Wilson in, and then it was like, where was Justin Fields going to go? Nearly everyone was saying Atlanta. Obviously, the big blockbuster signing of Kirk Cousins going to the Atlanta Falcons happened. So it was like, well, Fields isn't going to go there. He ends up, I mean, people already said it in the first place, but it would make sense then for Fields to maybe back Wilson up, very similar style of quarterbacks. Do you think this, the idea of this even happening all the way back a few months ago of bringing both of these guys in, do you think that was a sensible decision at the time for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
It certainly wasn't what many of us, probably including me, expected. But what I would say about them both coming in is they do feel like a bit of a package. And, both quarterbacks are in similar sort of situations, obviously at different parts of the career, both low on confidence, haven't, failed to secure their long-term future at their respective franchises. They're both struggling already in pre-season. I think, not to put myself in the dirt, but I didn't watch the game or watch a bit of the highlights. And yeah, it seems that both struggled. So I think, both are under pressure. But I don't know, it feels like they're both in this together. And I don't know who is going to be, the starting quarterback. I think you could make a big case for either name. It feels probably more lenient towards Wilson, and then perhaps, taking that bit of pressure of Justin Fields to come in when he has to. And I'd quite like to see that sort of tandem style, when something isn't going right with Russell Wilson. Obviously, 2 different quarterbacks who can offer a different thing for an offense. So yeah, but it's, as Andrew said, the offensive line issues have been there for a while, and that's something you don't really expect from your traditional Pittsburgh Steelers teams. And for these two quarterbacks, that's going to be a huge problem if they can't get that one solved. I know Broderick Jones has taken a lot of criticism in the last week or so, but they need to get that sorted to support these two quarterbacks who are obviously very, very low on confidence.
Going to go a bit off piste here, Fred. As it's your team, I feel like I'm going to take over as host for a little bit and just ask you some questions, because obviously you are a Steelers fan. I want to know what your feeling was when you signed the two guys, because for me, I thought it's a good bit of business. The quarterback play was absolutely horrendous last year, and you've got these two guys very cheap. You're not paying them a load. What was your thoughts then? And now you've seen 2 games. What are your thoughts now?
I think I never shied away from the fact that I've always loved Russell Wilson. I've always loved Russell Wilson. I've always thought he was a fantastic quarterback. I loved him in Seattle. Obviously in Denver, it didn't quite work out. And I was always very positive about Justin Fields, more so than a lot of people. I think that is definitely probably your voice in my ear about that, because I know how much you've championed Justin Fields for such a long time, obviously being an Ohio State fan yourself, and seeing him at the Bears. Now, I also, when I watched Bears games, thought very positively of him as well. When Wilson side, I thought, wow, this is great. I mean, we are bringing in a player that has had a really great career, a Hall of Fame style career for Seattle. A quarterback that I thought was very undervalued in Seattle. I thought that fans and media put more onus on the defensive side of the ball rather than Russell Wilson. There were certain people in the media that definitely know Russell Wilson's capability, but I always felt like it was a defense and Russell Wilson was the byproduct of that. Whereas I thought it was Wilson that commanded that team for a long time. So I thought if we could get a shred of that guy for Pittsburgh, this could be amazing, and that him going under Mike Tomlin as well would only be positive for us as well. A coach that has definitely been a player empowerment style coach rather than other coordinators and coaches that are out there. So I was really pleased with that, and I thought, it was a turbulent time for him in Denver, but I thought it was a turbulent franchise as well. You can say a lot of things about Pittsburgh, but we're not exactly turbulent as a franchise. We are quite consistent, as proven with Tomlin's winning record that he's had for all these years, never had a losing season. So I thought very positively about that. And then when we signed Justin Fields, I thought, well, that's sensible business. If it goes wrong with Wilson, we have Fields as back, a very similar style of quarterback. Fields having less years, less mileage on him as well, but also does know the league. I mean, when you've been in the league for 3 seasons, I feel like you do know. You know the NFL. You now know how to read defenses. You now know how to play the game in the NFL rather than at the college level. And there is similarities. There's also differences as well between the two quarterbacks as well. But what did frustrate me is I felt like we were going to a quarterback controversy style, and that would be what ultimately would be the shroud around the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is what it has been. I think no one's really outright gone Wilson's going to be the starter. I think that's something you need to sort of put the line in the sand straight away about when you are a franchise. I think it's not very sensible having that sort of open conversation. And I don't really feel like we have still got any answers to that question. Obviously, Wilson been not starting in that first preseason game, limited snap count for the second preseason game, obviously indicates that he is going to be the starter. But it's still very much up in the air, which I don't like for the Steelers, because that's what it's been like for the last few years. I've echoed this a lot of times. I did think it was a little bit late to do this quarterback stuff. I've said it so many times, and I hate to repeat myself, but I say it on this podcast and multiple podcasts. I always felt like we should have drafted Jalen Hurts when we drafted Chase Claypool in the second round. I'm not saying that Jalen Hurts would have been the quarterback he is today at the Steelers, but I thought that's what we should have. We should have prepared better for Big Ben's ultimate retirement, and we didn't. So we got ourselves into this situation. I think when we signed these two, I was like, this is us taking control of the situation, whereas us drafting Pickett felt like a reach. It felt like we were trying to sort of make up for the mistakes of past decisions, and the same with Trubisky as well. And ultimately, I've been excited about seeing these two play for the Steelers. And I at this point now, I'm sorry, you did say who do I think should start? Did you say that at the end?
Well, just what your feelings now? We've seen 2 games. What
Okay, yeah. So my feelings now is I think you stick with Wilson at the minute. Preseason, I don't take much onus on it, unfortunately, but I know a lot of people do. I think that Wilson needs to be given the opportunity to prove himself. He has got that chip on his shoulder. He has got that I need to prove it to the league mentality now, I think, at this point, and he can ultimately show it. But it is a worry about the O-line. I think the O-line has improved. I think it's still got ways to go. We have to remember that, this is 2 games in. There is still a lot of time before the start of the season and to get more togetherness, I suppose. And maybe because of this quarterback controversy, it's made the O-line nervous as well. Maybe there needs to be a bit more certainty about what we're doing as a franchise moving forward. I would be lying, though, to say there is not an element of me that wants Wilson to sort of not do well. Like that sounds really negative and bad of me. There is a massive part of me that is like, I really want to see Fields. I really want to see Fields take those snaps for the Steelers. And because he is that younger guy, we could get him on he could be this quarterback Fields could be a quarterback for the next 10 years, potentially for us. We could mold him into a player for us for a long time because he has that age on his side. And I am a little bit worried that if he plays for us and plays at top level, but we just don't invest in him, that there will be a team that comes along and offers him good money and maybe offers him a starting position. Because I do truly believe he could be a starter in this league still, and Wilson can be as well. So now I've seen them both. I'm still very much undecided. To sort of pull from Johnny's what Johnny said towards you, Andrew, he was saying they're at very different points in their career, and I've sort of mentioned that as well. Wilson, his career started in 2012 with the Seahawks, 43,653 yards, 334 touchdowns, 106 interceptions, 5,307 rushing yards, 29 touchdowns on his career. Where do you think it sort of started to go wrong for Russell Wilson? Because it has been a huge decline out of sort of nowhere for Wilson in a team with Seattle that was not a top team. But when he was in that last 4 years for him, it was not a top team. There was times where I felt he was dragging wins for that team, and they did surround him with weapons with people like Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson when he was there for the moment until he retired, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, of course. Where do you think it sort of went wrong for him?
It's age, really, isn't it? Age is not on his side. And when he got a little bit older, you got to remember in his prime, when everyone fell in love with Russell Wilson, when he made smaller quarterbacks like relevant in drafts, was because he was scrambling around, he was making magic out of nothing, and that was his skill set. He wasn't stand in the pocket. This is where I am. I've got a great arm. I deliver it out. He created magic out of nothing. He moved out of the pocket, and that's where he became dangerous. And he's just started to slow down a bit. He's had a couple of injuries as he's got older, and he's not really come back as sharp and as fit. And that's, you're never going to when you're at his age now. And I think he's still trying to cling on to his old style of play. I think you need to adapt. You need to change because Sean Payton got very frustrated with Russell Wilson when he was at Denver, mainly because he was holding on to the ball too long. He was taking a lot of sacks. He was still trying to scramble outside, and it just wasn't working. And I know you said preseason, you're not going to take too much of that on board, but I saw a lot of that again, just a lot of the same. And I think when you're talking of a guy, like you said, Russell Wilson, with all these accolades and all of this stuff that he's done and how amazing he was. I mean, we heard Sky talk about how he fell in love with him. We've now talked about how you fell in love with him. I'm sure Johnny's probably similar. Everyone did. And the guy can't throw a first down in 8 drives on a preseason game. And that just screams to me that he might be his time. He might not have any more left in the tank because a guy of his ability should be able to get a first down in a preseason game. You're taking it as, it's preseason. I'm taking it as, well, he can't even do it in preseason, and that's against some backups. I know a lot of starters were playing. So, yeah, I think age isn't on his side. And it's just, it's like the frustrations that were there in Denver have come over to the Steelers. So for me, Wilson's not the guy, and he's not my starter. So this is why I feel like it's been for a game that was 9-3. There's been a lot of talk about this game since it's finished, and I think that's why, because you've got a young guy that can scramble around and he got 42 yards, create a first down with his legs, and a guy that just looks a bit old and tired. He's got his calf injury, I know that, but I think he's past it, Fred.
I'm going to tell like a bit of a weird anecdote, which does relate to this because it's just sort of popped into my brain. A person who I used to work with, they had a guy they worked with, and their department, it was always in trouble a lot of the time, or in the S, as people would say. And he constantly worked like he was not in trouble, but like he was a kitchen guy. He was always in trouble and always sort of frantic. Very, very good at his job. Very, very good at his job, but was very, very frantic. And anyway, this member of staff then moved to another site that was, and admittedly, the atmosphere of that site was a very frantic, always in the trouble sort of site. He moved to another site, and they were that was not their culture. They were never in the trouble. They wanted to be calm, relaxed. If it can't be done, it can't be done. Let's not worry about it. We can bend, we can break. But when he was there, he was still frantic and always in trouble, and always felt like he was in trouble. And they said to him, like, look, this is not the atmosphere we're creating. We are not in trouble. It's fine. And I think that analogy works incredibly well for Russell Wilson, because in Seattle, he was having poor O-lines, and every time he got snapped the ball, he was in trouble, and he was so frantic, and it worked, and there was positivity, and he did well out of that. But he then was constantly doing that, even though the O-line got a bit better, and then he moves to Denver with a pretty decent O-line, and was still doing that. And it was like, no, that's not how we're doing it here. We're not in trouble all the time. We're calmer here. And after seeing how he was playing the other day in the preseason, he's doing that still. It's almost like the negative things that happened in Seattle, he can't get rid of in a way. And I don't know whether it's a mentality thing, a brain thing, but it's almost like he feels like he's always in the S word, and he can't let that go. Is that? I know that it sounds. It's a very, very long way to where I was getting to with my point, Johnny. I have to admit. But do you think that is sort of this has been this knock-on effect with him, that it got really bad in Seattle for him, and he's never really sort of quite let that go, where he can be a bit calmer and just let himself go?
Well, the point I was going to make is that it feels like there's lower expectations on the Steelers this year, despite what is certainly, in terms of the names that have come in, an improvement at quarterback. And perhaps that can really help Russell Wilson settle, because let's face it, this is the Steelers team got to the playoffs last year with a quarterback trio of Pickett, Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph. And I don't want to judge the two quarterbacks on a couple of preseason games. They're obviously concerning, and I think that erratic nature that you mentioned, Fred, I think has certainly been evident, obviously, in the Broncos with that huge trade, which just proved too much for Wilson, and coming in here early on. But yeah, I really don't want to shun the Steelers too much, because we know what the team is capable of, and I just hope that it feels to me that, I don't know, looking on social media and talking to you both just in this sort of conversation, that we're writing the Steelers off because of the poor quarterback play that we've seen, and these two quarterbacks who are been considered failures by their respective franchises obviously still have the talent underneath. And let's wait till the season starts. I think both just need to control their emotions and not get too caught up, like you say, in their expectations of taking this team to the next level. I think clearly we're going to see both players at some point this year, whether that be because one is dropped for the other, or things are just not working out, and there's need for a change. I don't know. I'm a little on the fence with the Steelers because I think maybe I'm getting too caught up in the namesake, because I know Wilson and Fields are clear upgrades. I don't think we should be writing them off completely because of one game. Obviously, I've said that there are warning signs, but it's let's hope, because
as a non-biased Johnny, what's your expectations for them, and what do you think their win total could be? Do you think are you giving them...
Again, I think I've been caught up in the whole, Steelers are going to be poor, but I don't necessarily think they'll be worse than last year. What was their win total last year? They must have finished 9-8. I could see them grinding something out.
10-7 again.
10-7. I think at very middle in the road. That's an unbelievable record for the quarterback play that we saw there last year, and just how chaotic that room was. I think if Wilson and Fields can just match that, they should be okay, because we know how reliant they are on their superb defense, which with the sign of the Patrick Queen has, I think, probably improved the defensive side of the ball. So that's obviously a huge positive. So I really don't know about the Steelers, but I think let's try not to write them off too early, because this is what we expect from Mike Tomlin and this team. But yeah, it's certainly last chance saloon for both these quarterbacks.
See, this is my problem, because Adam said the exact same thing when we did the AFC North review the other day. Is what are you going to expect from Steelers? He said, well, nothing. They're going to be the exact same. If it feels like there is going to be no change, we didn't get these two quarterbacks in for them to not move the needle. Like these two names should move the needle. They'll sell jerseys. They'll get bums in seats. But there's no problem in Pittsburgh. We're getting bums in seats, whether we're winning or losing. Pittsburgh Steelers fans are going to go to Pittsburgh games. It is a sort of small market team, I suppose, in terms of city size and everything like that. But we got these two in to move that needle for us to go to that next step, to challenge the Ravens, I'd like to think. Admittedly, we have a new offensive coordinator with Arthur Smith. And that has to be sort of considered as well, because these offenses are not going to be front. Smith definitely runs a run-first offense, which suits us with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, even though Jalen Warren is going to be missing a few weeks, unfortunately. But let's go circle back to Justin Fields, because Andrew, like I said, he got drafted in 2021 from Ohio State to Chicago Bears, 6,674 yards, 40 touchdowns to 30 interceptions. 2,220 rush yards, 14 touchdowns, which is what people love about him, is his rushing capability. You have never wavered on how good he is. And when you found out that he signed for the Steelers, how did you feel about that? Because I know you almost extracurricularly keep an eye on Justin Fields because you like him that much and you champion him that much. And as a fan of him and as a fan of Ohio State and seeing his career go, and wanting his career to be amazing for him, what did you think when he signed for the Steelers?
Yeah, I do know. Just pleased for him to get another chance and another job. I thought the Steelers would be a good organisation for him to go to settle in. They've never, like you said, they've never really had any real big drama. There's never any sort of outspokenness of locker room issues or people who are doing anything like that. Justin Fields is very well respected as well. I think that's a real good point to take. A lot of the Bears fans all liked him and wanted to keep him. A lot of the players thought it was fantastic and wanted him to be the starter. I think that's a real good tick and a good plus mark. So coming into this organization, there's a lot of big names. I think he'll get on well with everyone as well. So I just thought, this is a good organization for him to have a second chance at. And he needs a bit of stability because he's had so many different coordinators, head coaches, even GMs at the Bears, that he's never really been able to settle on a group of people to say, this is what you're doing wrong, let's work on it. He's had, this is what you're doing wrong, let's work on it, to someone else come in and go, oh, I want to change it. So they change his footwork, they change this, they change that. And it just, I think it's knocked his confidence a bit. I know it's off topic a little bit, but we heard Tua talking recently in an interview about Brian Flores, about the way he treated him and the way it affected his game and the way he just felt every day someone saying something about him made him be that player. And then once McDaniels came in, he was told he was good and it made him good. And I just think maybe there's a similar situation here. So many people have come in and said, Fields, you're not doing this right. You're doing this wrong, that he's trying to change little things to make himself better and doing the wrong thing. He should just go back to what he was doing at Ohio, because I saw him throw the ball for 4,000 plus yards every season. And it wasn't this big rushing attack that we've seen from him. It was throwing the ball that he was good at. So I know it's in there, and I know he's got his problems in the NFL, that he's struggling to read the field at a quicker pace, but maybe some stability in an organization that's quite loyal and quite, they look after their guys well. Maybe this could be a chance for him to maybe work on those little things that he needs to tweak. Because for me, Justin Fields just needs to tweak a few things to get better. I think you can get more out of him. He's got a higher ceiling than Russell Wilson. So if you tweak those things and he gets it right, you've got a dynamic young guy that, if the O-line is struggling, you've got old school Russell Wilson flying out like outside the pocket and creating some drama. So for me, I think he's got more upside for you guys if he tweaks those small little things that are holding him back at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, Freddie, you mentioned that, there's a bit that you want Russell Wilson to fail early on if he is the starter. But, let's give Justin Fields a little bit of a break. I really hope that he, sits for a few weeks just to, observe from, a bench point of view. He's not had a chance to do that in the NFL. And, he's the epitome of a player who, as Andrew's mentioned, hasn't been supported, hasn't had the cast around him. All right, the Steelers cast isn't incredible when compared to other offenses, but let's see what he can do when he gets his chance. Because I think, as Andrew said, there's definitely someone. For me personally, at the start, coming into last year, I was really hoping that the Bears would build around him, and obviously, Caleb Williams looks unbelievable, but I was really hoping that Fields would get a chance and maybe. That's with a stable franchise like the Steelers. Once he's had a chance to learn and settle in quite nicely.
I think the conclusion for me, and I think this is what it is for most Steelers fans, is ultimately we all want Fields to start, but we don't want to write off Russell Wilson just yet. You know what I mean? That's ultimately, I think, what everyone is feeling is like, yeah, well, it makes complete sense that we should start Fields, but what if Russell Wilson still has it? If he still has it, then we could go. We could hit heights, but we all have to admit it would be heights for a very short amount of time. But we are sort of due a little bit of a rebuild at some point, I suppose, because we are getting a little bit older in the defense, especially, and there is going to be a reset point, I suppose. But we could have Fields on a cheap contract and still do the reset with doing well. So in conclusion, I think we all want Fields to sort of win the job, I think. Well, I do anyway, personally, but we just don't want to write Russell Wilson off just yet. But we'll move on. We've got plenty to be talking about. We have got plenty of more shows coming to you. We're going to do another divisional preview for you guys later on this week. We're also going to have our regular show starting up soon, I believe. Am I right in saying the college show is going to be debuting
tomorrow?
So we are debuting our new college football show, which Andrew and Adam will be involved in, and Alex as well, who will be joining our team and doing the podcast as well. So that's very, very exciting. So make sure you check that out tomorrow. If not live, make sure you check it out on YouTube, social media, and get behind all the content that we're doing. Lots of exciting things to come. We are going to move on, though, to Nick Sirianni. A interesting topic, and imagine a topic that Andrew's got a lot to speak about. Seems that he's a New York Giants fan of the NFC East. And the Philadelphia Eagles, Johnny. We're talking about them as well, because a lot of reports have come out in the last week or so that last year was a very, very fractured relationship, Johnny, between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. They ended up going 11-6. They lost 32-9 the wild card against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They did lose they lost 5 of the last 8 games. Obviously, coming 11-6, they were second in the division. They were just not the dominant Eagles team we saw the year before, Johnny. And we know that this Eagles franchise, at the fan base anyway, can be very aggressive aggressive with their opinion and very forthright and very forward. And that's why people love them, because they are so they're the in a way that they're almost like it's like a cinema when they're there and they're talking about their team, and they sort of have the weird football hooliganism of the late 80s and 90s in England when we think of their fan base. They're very passionate, I suppose is the polite word to say. These reports have been coming out that this sort of relationship has been fractured with Sirianni and Jalen has not really had the rebuttal of, oh, it's completely fine now just yet. What was your initial thoughts when these reports came out?
Yeah, very unsurprising, to be fair. I think obviously, difficult into last year. The off-season hasn't been, it's been fairly rocky in terms of these reports. But I think, what was obvious last year is, the play calling, particularly on offense, was just horrendous. And reports, say that while Brian Johnson was the offensive coordinator, it was very much Sirianni taking the calls, playing very conservatively, and obviously that's not going to go down well with a franchise quarterback, particularly someone as explosive as Jalen Hurts. It feels really strange, this one, because obviously they've quite changed coordinators on both sides of the field. The only person left to fire is Nick Sirianni. So I think if things don't start well for the Eagles this year, I think we could see Sirianni out of a job, because he's being, outed as, they're obviously going to give Jalen Hurts a huge contract. Was last year, the year before? They're obviously going to back the player. And I think there's been, reports over the summer that, it's not just Hurts, there's been a few other players who've had disagreements, whether that be, on or off the field. And it just doesn't feel that Sirianni has the control on this team. And I think the negative energy from last year is lingering on. I don't know, huge amounts of the behind the scenes of the Eagles, but obviously the two changes, they've brought in two solid guys on both sets of the field in terms of their coordinators, Moore and Fangio. So hopefully that can bring a bit of stability. I think both have, fairly decent track records as coordinators. So it'd be really interesting to see how the Eagles get on at the very start of this year, or we could see a change in Philly very, very soon.
He's quite a polarizing character, Andrew, isn't he? I mean, he does the head shaking at the camera, and he sort of has that sort of Jose Mourinho about him, doesn't he? That sort of self-confidence and maybe a bit of an ego about him. But it was quite quick, it felt like, that the sort of Eagles fans turned on him in a way. It didn't feel like it was a slow decline. It suddenly, he was great, and then suddenly he's not great. And I mean, do you think he's deserving of that? I mean, they still won 11 games last season. They still got to the playoffs. Okay, they weren't the team they were the year before, but got to the Super Bowl. But they still had a successful season by all accounts, didn't they?
I would have thought the fans would say no, they didn't. It's one of them where if you're not getting to the championship game or the Super Bowl based on the team that you've got and the way you've been playing, maybe the way that they faded and failed at the end of the year, they see that as a disappointing season. Your expectations got to be high when you're as dominant as what the Eagles have been over the last couple of years. So they might see that as a failure. And, as much as I might not want to say this, the Eagles fans are some of the most loyal and invested fans you can have. And they're proper football fans as well, aren't they? They live and breathe it. And I think it doesn't take them long to notice that their head coach just doesn't really fit with their ethos to be. The guy wants to be like a CEO kind of head coach. He doesn't want to call one side of the ball. He wants to rely on his coordinators, but he's lost the locker room, and the quarterback doesn't get on with him. So he's not a Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell, he looks like when he's on the sideline, he could lead men into war. Whether they lose or win, they'll put 110% into it. That's the kind of CEO, sort of head coach you want, the one that gives those big speeches. That's like a big character that will push his team and raise them. He doesn't seem like that type of guy. So I feel like he's not the right fit, and I think he's in a really, really sticky situation because Johnny talks about if it doesn't go well for the Eagles, he's going to be on the chopping block. But I also see the other side of it, of what if it goes fantastic and their offense is firing on all cylinders and they're really, really good and they do get to the championship game and they are great, because then you kind of go in, well, we've already let one offensive coordinator walk out the door and look how amazing he is. Should we let Sirianni go and maybe not lose Kellen Moore? Because I think Kellen Moore, if they're good and Kellen Moore's offense is fantastic, he'll be touted for head coaching jobs, won't he? Straight away. Because it's been a few years that we spoke about him a few years back that he could be the next guy that gets a shot. He's not quite had it yet. So if they're great, I think he could lose his job as well, because will they make that mistake again? They've been ruthless. They let Andy Reid go mutually. Will they be ruthless and go, no, look, you're gone. Kellen Moore's the new guy. The offense is great with him. If he's in there, we know he's going to be calling the plays. Fangio's, I don't think he's going to head coach again. I think he's one of these guys that's now just a defensive coordinator. So you've got a thing going there. The two of them could then roll on season after season with the success that they've had if they're good. So I just worry for Sirianni that I think he's in a lose-lose situation. If they're good, he might go. If they're bad, he's definitely gone. I think they've got some real thinking to do at the Eagles through the season. But I think Sirianni's might be on the chopping block by the end of the year, regardless of whether it's good or bad.
I think I've said this before. I've said this either last week or the week, or on another podcast. But there is a way to win and there's a way to lose, And there's a bad way to win and there's a good way to win. And I felt like last year that the Eagles were not winning pretty, and Philadelphia doesn't mind not winning pretty, but they have an expectation now to dominate games but also to play in a way that they play in a style that is also exciting as well. And last season, it just didn't feel as exciting. Do you think, Johnny, that maybe there was some of the moves they made this offseason, like bringing in Saquon Barkley, were a little bit sort of papering up the cracks of like, we're going to have exciting football here in Philadelphia again without getting rid of Sirianni? It's sort of maybe moving the eyes away from what might be the problem. Yeah, certainly.
Definitely. I mean, if you think of a football team, a Premier League chasing team, who has, obviously finished right at the top one season. Obviously, the Eagles got to the Super Bowl. They've now been crushed in the wild card race, i.e., falling outside of the Champions League places. The manager stays. They're going to try and do everything to, get the team back in and make those big name signings. Whether or not it'll work is another thing, because the manager, the head coach is still there. Obviously the reports of the sour relationship between Hurts and Sirianni. You wonder where they've come from, but yeah, I think Howie will be keeping a close eye on what's happening in the run up to the start of the year. I think Andrew's made a brilliant point. Is in what stage would Sirianni still be here next year if they get to the playoffs? We could see a situation where Moore takes over. I think that's definitely something that I had not thought of, but wow, okay, yeah, that's a real possibility. I think they have to get back to pushing to get back into the Super Bowl this year, because that's where they were before they fell off. With 5 or 6 games to go last year, that's the expectation. The fans want that. Something has to change. Something has to give. It's all pointing in one direction at the moment.
But that's a good point, Johnny, because Andrew, this is a two-way relationship. This is Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. We're talking all about Nick Sirianni. Is there any blame to be laid at the feet of Jalen Hurts? Because this is a two-way thing, No,
I'm not sure you can blame Hurts, really. There's none of the players are coming out and saying Hurts has got a bad relationship with me. You're not seeing AJ Brown going, "Oh, get him out. He's not throwing me the ball. The connection's not there. It's sour. The relationship's not good." You're not hearing any of the O-linemen. Jason Kelsey's got nothing to lose to say that Hurts isn't the guy if he wanted to now. But we're not hearing any of that. We're hearing a lot of Sirianni's the problem. So I don't think it's a two-way. I think just the quarterback's maybe voicing his opinion for the team. Maybe there might be other players on that team that don't want to risk their spot, maybe by saying, "Oh yeah, I didn't get on with him as well." So he might just be being a leader and stepping up for his guys and saying, "Yeah, he's not quite there with the team, but he's going to say me instead of calling out some of the others." So I'm not sure there's anything on Hurts. I mean, again, it's a guy that I followed massively at college, and it's a guy that's stayed on his Alabama team when he was dropped and played as the backup, and then moved to another team. And he's a guy that puts 110% in everywhere he is, and he's a high character guy. And for me as well, I know I've probably brought this up before, but if you ever hear him at the podium, if you ever hear him doing pre-match or after match or anything at the podium, he speaks so well, and he's such an intelligent guy when he's on there. I can't see how he could come across like that he would have problems or areas of issue in that field.
Yeah, it maybe has been the case that the captain meeting has been called, and he's sort of said, I will take the brunt for this. I'm the leader. I'm the quarterback for this team. If we feel as a team, but, we can't trust Sirianni, we don't think this is the right route to go, we won't say it's the team because that will obviously be blown up to huge proportions. Not that this hasn't been blown up to quite big proportions, it is, but I think you're right in sort of that leadership quality he has. He's that sort of player that would go, I will take the fall here. I'll fall on the sword for the sake of the team and be the bad guy if I have to. The problem is he's not being painted as the bad guy at all, is he? Because everyone sees Sirianni as the bad guy in this comic book movie, whereas Jalen Hurts is the Superman, the Batman of this franchise. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out going into the 2024 season. Thank you both. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Andrew. I'll give you, Andrew, the platform actually to plug the college show that will be happening tomorrow, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time for college football. We spoke about it for a couple of years now about doing one, but the expansion to the playoffs, the realignment of some of the divisions. College football's never been more exciting than it is now. So now's the time to get into it if you've not watched it. So we're going to start a show. We've got Alex coming on board. He's got a wealth of knowledge of college football as well. So we're going to try and get more people into it because, like I said, it's probably the second most exciting sport in the whole of America now as well. It's overtaken, the NBA. So now's the time to get into it. So listen to us. We'll help you out. We'll guide you through it. And we'll have a great time, and you'll all know more about the college players, and our draft show will be even better. So that's tomorrow night, 6:30, and I believe that we're going to be doing every Wednesday through the season. So yeah, come along, have a listen, and learn more about college football.
Certainly, and also as well, you missed the hit rate. The hit rate of college players going to the NFL now is so high. It's so high now compared to how it has been. A lot of these players have been incredibly successful from rounds 1 to even undrafted. These players are, Brock Purdy, what a great example, being the Mr. Relevant last player in the draft, is hit for the San Francisco 49ers. So it's now more than ever that you should know college players and sort of follow their journey. And it's so personable. And also the inception of EA College, the football game that's come out as well. I mean, I support Michigan, but I'm by no means a college aficionado. But the likes of Will Johnson and is it Mason Graham, the defensive tackle? I'm getting to know them. The Barham, the middle linebacker, and these are all players I've started to learn playing as Michigan, and there seem to be the players that they're going to be are going to be drafted as well one day. So yeah, make sure you check that out. Make sure you check out all the shows that we are doing throughout the season. Make sure you check us out on social media and on YouTube. We'll see you all again very soon. Have a great rest of your week.